So what we're going to do now is move into sort of the Q&A part of this session, and I'm going to begin it by dealing with some frequently asked questions that are almost knee-jerk questions with this kind of an approach. And then Dave Hirschman's going to follow up, and depending on how much time we have, we're going to take questions from those of you out in attendee land. So the first question that is inevitably asked about all this, okay, we've come up with this unitized way of reporting that sort of normalizes across all of the different state standards, all of the different state BMP pollution removal credits. Does that mean that using this process is going to supersede my state's regulations and compliance requirements? The simple answer is no. As Randy pointed out, each state has different runoff depth requirements. They give different performance credits for their BMP standards. There are other unique features of each of the state regs. And so EPA was stuck with, for reporting in the model and for accountability against the TMDL, they were stuck with the awkward situation of comparing apples to oranges, essentially, or counting apples and oranges. And so this method was developed to kind of normalize that. However, I think I can safely say that each state considers it in their own interest and in the interest of their localities to ensure that everyone gets full credit for whatever the state regs provide. Nobody wants to undercount their loads because they're being held to load reduction targets by the TMDL. And so each of the states is taking steps to be sure that everyone gets full credit, and that's probably especially true for the MS4 communities because they have the additional burden of permit requirements. So the way this is envisioned, there would be essentially one round of reporting where the localities report through their annual MS4 permit reports to the state MPDES agency, what load reductions they've achieved through all these BMPs. Randy went over the kinds of features that you would report on, the number of acres treated, whether it's runoff reduction or stormwater treatment practices, et cetera, et cetera. And then the state is going to enter that data into the scenario builder or the MAST or the VAST or whatever accountability program that they're using. And they'll calculate the loads per basin segment and the load reductions achieved using these curves. And for instance, Virginia is developing a web app called e-permitting. And in the Virginia case, localities will be inputting data as the year goes along. So they would have access to that both for their own reporting purposes, but that would just be sort of a cumulative accounting. And the localities could pull all that out, put it in their annual reports, but the state agency would already have it in the web app. And anyone who has a profile on the system as an administrator would be able to go in there and pull data out as well. So I'm sure the other states are doing similar kinds of reporting. Another question that's asked is, well, what if I have a project that has a mix of stormwater treatment practice and runoff reduction practices? What do I report? You're telling me I'm only going to report one thing. And the answer is that we're recommending that you use, that you report on the predominant type of BMP that's used on the site, the kind of BMP that treats the most acres on the site. So that could be either runoff reduction or stormwater treatment. Some folks have asked, well, why don't we do a weighted average? And so the percent of the drainage area that's treated with stormwater treatment is quantified, and that with runoff reduction is quantified, and you do a weighted average. And you could do that, and some states may decide to require that, but keep in mind this isn't the most precise calculation world to start with, and so you may be going through a lot of effort to get sort of false precision. And so we believe that if you report the predominant type of BMP and the acres treated in the project, that would be sufficient. Another way you could do it is to report the percentage of the areas treated under stormwater treatment plus the percentage that are treated under runoff reduction. That would probably get you a more accurate total. But again, the states will make those determinations, and those numbers will be reported up. What happens if I have a redevelopment site and there's already a BMP on the site? And the simple answer is that unless it was previously reported to the state for credit in the model, you don't have to account for it. The removal rates for those old practices tend to be very low anyway. If it was reported, you may still get credit for your new BMP as a retrofit. And how do I deal with historic BMPs that were reported in the past? Those BMPs, as Randy pointed out, are typically considered non-conforming, and I'm going to show you a flow chart in a second that sort of helps you decide if I have this situation, here's the process I go through, and the non-conforming BMPs are shown on that flow chart. So how do I deal with that? Well, if you look at this flow chart, and I'll see if I can get the mouse over where is mine? There he is.
This flow chart, by the way, is known as the famous Matt Johnson flow chart.
For you out there in web world, Tom was reminding us that this is known as the famous Matt Johnston flow chart. Anyway, if you can see where the mouse is, over on this side of the flow chart, we have a box that says non-conforming project, and below that there's a choice that says served with a single BMP or another choice served with multiple BMPs. And if it's a single BMP, you would tend to take whatever credit was originally assigned to that and go on through the steps. If it's multiple BMPs, one of the things you could do is to use the curves and figure out what type of BMP it is and calculate it that way. And I won't get into this flow chart much more than that. I had nothing to do with developing it, and I've looked at it and studied it for a couple of days, but I don't feel competent to answer a lot of questions about it. So Matt's on the hook for that. So what do I need to report to the state, and to whom do I report it? Well, Randy touched on this a few minutes ago, but essentially you're going to report the number of treated acres on the project, either the predominant type of BMP, runoff reduction or stormwater treatment, or perhaps both. It depends on what the state decides. The runoff depth per impervious acre, the total protected area, the date installed, and a GPS or lat-long coordinates so that the state and the locality know the location of that BMP for long-term maintenance purposes. And to whom are you going to report that? There's a list here by state of the program leaders. When this all gets worked out, these names may change. They may be people in staff in the stormwater programs. That'll be the collection agents. But these are the people that are on the hook right now. So in Virginia, Jenny Sneed, my boss, is the stormwater program leader. Bill Keeling is our model world expert, and he collects all the data and crunches it for us.